B. The Steam House, by Jules Verne. Translated by Agnes D. Kingston. Chapter 14. Captain Hood's 50th Tiger. Colonel Munro and his party had now nothing further to fear either from the nabob and the natives who followed his fortunes, or from the dacoit who had so long troubled this part of Bundelkund. At the sound of the explosion, soldiers issued from the guardhouse in imposing numbers. Finding themselves without a leader, the dacoit no sooner perceived this reinforcement than they instantly took to flight. Colonel Munro made himself known. In half an hour's time they reached the station, where they were supplied with all they needed, and especially food, of which they were in great want. Lady Munro was lodged in a comfortable hotel until it was possible for her to be removed to Bombay. There Sir Edward trusted that his tender care would at last restore life to the soul of her whose body was at present the only living part, and who would still be dead to him unless her reason returned. None of his friends despaired of the final recovery of Lady Munro. All confidently awaited it as the only thing which could entirely alter the colonel's existence. It was settled that the next day they should start for Bombay by the first train. This time they would be carried away by a common locomotive, instead of the indefatigable behemoth, who now, alas, lay in shapeless ruins. But neither his ardent admirer, Captain Hood, nor Banks, his ingenious inventor, nor indeed any of the members of the expedition, could ever forget the faithful animal to whom they all agreed in ascribing real life. Long did the noise of the explosion which annihilated him ring in their ears. Before leaving Jubbulpore, Banks, Hood, Mauclair, Fox, and Goomy naturally wished to pay a visit to the scene of the catastrophe. There was nothing to be feared from the band of dacoit, yet as a precautionary measure, when the engineer and his companions reached the outpost, a detachment of soldiers joined them, and proceeded with them to the entrance of the defile. On the ground lay 5 or 6 mutilated corpses, the bodies of those who had rushed on Behemoth for the purpose of freeing Nana Sahib. Of the remainder of the band there was not a trace. Instead of returning to the ruined fortress, the last faithful followers of the Nana had dispersed through the Nerbudda valley. Poor Behemoth had been utterly destroyed by the bursting of his boiler. One of his huge feet was found at a great distance. A part of his trunk blown against the cliff, stuck fast, and now projected like a gigantic arm. To a great distance the ground was strewn with fragments of iron, screws, bolts, pins, remains of pipes, valves, and cylinders. At the moment of the explosion, the tension of the force of steam must indeed have been terrific, perhaps exceeding 20 atmospheres. And now, of that artificial elephant of which the dwellers in Steam House had been so proud, that colossal animal which had provoked the superstitious admiration of the natives, the mechanical masterpiece of Banks the engineer, the realized dream of the whimsical Rajah of Bhutan, what remained? Only a valueless and unrecognizable skeleton. Poor beast, sighed Captain Hood as he gazed on the body of his beloved Behemoth. We can make another which shall be even still more powerful, said Banks. No doubt, returned the captain, heaving another deep sigh, but it won't be him. Whilst pursuing their investigations, the engineer and his companions anxiously looked for the remains of Nana Sahib. Even if his face were not recognizable, the finding of a hand which had lost a finger would be sufficient to prove his identity. It would be satisfactory to have this unquestionable proof of the death of the man who could no longer be mistaken for his brother, Balau Rao. But none of the bloody remains which strewed the ground appeared to belong to him who once was Nana Sahib. Had his followers carried away every trace and vestige of him? That was more than probable. The result of this was, that there being no certain proof of the death of Nana Sahib, a legend sprang up amongst the population of central India. To them their unseen nabob was still living. They regarded him as an immortal being. Banks and his friends were, however, positive that Nana Sahib could not have survived the explosion. They returned to the town, though not until Captain Hood had picked up a piece of one of Behemoth's tusks, which he ever afterwards treasured as a remembrance. The next day, the 4th of October, all left Jubalpur by train. 24 hours later, they crossed the Western Ghauts, the Andes of Hindustan, which stretch their immense length through dense forests of banyans, sycamores, teaks, mingled with palms, cocoa trees, arias, pepper trees, sandalwood, and bamboos. In a few hours more the railway deposited them on the island of Bombay, which, with the islands of Salsette, Elephanta, and others, forms a magnificent roadstead and port, at the southeastern extremity of which stands the capital of the Presidency. Colonel Munro did not wish to remain in this great town, swarming with Arabs, Persians, Banyans, Abyssinians, Parsees, or Guebres, Sinds, Europeans of every nationality, and also Hindus. The physicians whom he consulted on the state of Lady Munro recommended him to take her to a villa in the neighbourhood, where perfect quiet, combined with their great attention and the incessant care of her husband, could not fail to produce a salutary effect. A month passed. Not one of the Colonel's companions, not one of his servants thought of leaving him. They wished to be near him on the not far distant day which they hoped would witness the cure of the poor lady. This joy came at last. Little by little Lady Munro's senses returned. The mind resumed its natural balance. Of her who had been roving flame there remained not a trace. She herself had no recollection of that sad time. "Laura, Laura!" exclaimed the Colonel, as Lady Munro, at last fully recognizing him, was clasped in his arms. A week after this, the inhabitants of Steam House were united once more in the bungalow at Calcutta. Another life was beginning in the beautiful dwelling, very different to that which had formerly been passed within its walls. Banks was entreated to pass his leisure time there, Hood to return whenever he could get leave. As to Macneill and Gummi, they belonged to the house, and could never be separated from Colonel Munro. About this time Mauclair was obliged to leave Calcutta to return to Europe. He took leave at the same time as Hood, whom the devoted Fox was to follow to the military cantonments of Madras. "Good-bye, Captain," said Colonel Munro. "I am glad to think that you have nothing to regret in your journey across northern India, except not having shot your 50th tiger." "But I did shoot him, Colonel." "What, the 50th? When was that?" "Why," returned the captain with a flourish, 49 tigers and Caliganni. Does not that make 50? End of the second and last part. End of Section 30. End of The Steam House by Jules Verne. Translated by Agnes D. Kingston.